The skies above Elwyn Forest erupted in a cascade of emerald fire and twisting void energy, reality itself tearing open like parchment as something foreign, something impossible, punched through the veil between worlds. The anomaly burned against the afternoon sky, a gash of crimson and gold streaking downward with the fury of a falling star. It carved through ancient oaks and shattered stone before slamming into the fertile plains 3 kilometers from Goldshire with the impact of a siege weapon hitting fortress walls. The explosion sent earth and grass skyward in a billowing cloud of debris. Farmers working the fields dropped their tools and ran. Children playing near the stream scattered toward their homes, and the guards stationed at the nearby watchtower immediately sounded the alarm. 3 sharp blasts of the horn echoed across the valley, the universal signal for unknown threat. Within the smoking crater, wreathed in ash and flickering electrical discharge, something moved. A figure struggled to its feet, humanoid in shape, but clad in fragments of armor unlike anything seen on Azeroth. Red and gold pieces clung to a human form, some sections sparking with dying energy, others missing entirely. Where a faceplate should have protected the head, there was instead the face of a man, dark-haired with a precisely trimmed goatee, his eyes wide with the sharp assessment of someone who had survived too many impossible situations to panic. Tony Stark coughed, tasting dirt and something else. Something that felt wrong in the air, like ozone mixed with arcane energy. His heads-up display flickered weakly before shorting out completely. "Jarvis, status report," he muttered. Silence answered him, not even static. "Friday?" More silence. Tony lifted his hand, watching as the nanites in his gauntlet struggled to maintain cohesion. Whatever he'd flown through had done a number on his tech. "Okay, definitely not Kansas," he said to himself. "Not even the same planet, judging by that." He gestured at the sky where 2 moons were clearly visible despite it being mid-afternoon. The sound of armored boots on soil drew his attention. From the crater's edge, figures were descending, moving with military precision. They wore plate armor of blue and gold, tabards bearing a lion's head crest, and carried swords and shields that gleamed in the strange sunlight. Behind them, others in robes lifted their hands, and Tony's engineering mind struggled to process what he was seeing as genuine flames and frost began to coalesce around their fingers without any visible technology. "Sir, remain where you are," commanded the lead soldier, a grizzled man with the bearing of someone who'd seen too many battles. His hand rested on his sword hilt. "You will identify yourself and your purpose here. Stormwind does not take kindly to unauthorized magical arrivals." Tony raised his hand slowly. "Tony Stark, civilian consultant, definitely unauthorized because I didn't even know this place existed until about 30 seconds ago." He glanced at the soldiers, the mages, the medieval architecture in the distance. "Let me guess. Renaissance fair? No, wait, your magic guys are actually conjuring fire. That's new." The guard captain's eyes narrowed. "You speak nonsense, stranger. Your arrival bore the signature of fell magic or worse. We have standing orders regarding void-touched arrivals." He drew his sword. "You will come with us to Stormwind Keep where SI-7 can determine your threat level." Tony's damaged armor calculated his chances. With full power, this would be manageable. With maybe 15% power and half his armor missing, this was a problem. "Look, I appreciate the hospitality, but I'm going to have to decline the interrogation. Nothing personal." Before the captain could respond, a roar split the air. From the forest beyond the crater, massive shapes emerged, green-skinned and towering, clad in crude armor of iron and bone. They wielded axes the size of a man. "Loktar Ogre, for the Horde." The Stormwind guards immediately pivoted, forming a defensive line. In the chaos of the sudden Horde raid, Tony made his move. The repulsor in his right palm flickered with residual energy. He aimed at the ground near the captain's feet and fired. The blast threw up a cloud of dirt, and Tony engaged his boot thrusters, sputtering but sufficient to propel him over the crater's rim and toward the tree line. Behind him, steel clashed on steel, magic crackled, and war cries echoed. Tony dove into the underbrush, his armor's camouflage systems completely offline. The forest was dense and ancient, with trees that looked centuries old. Strange sounds echoed through the woods, and twice he spotted creatures that defied biology. A rabbit with horns, a deer that shimmered and vanished. Definitely not Earth, Tony confirmed, checking his failing systems. The arc reactor in his chest flickered, its blue glow unstable. Power at 14% and dropping, nanites barely holding cohesion. No communications, no navigation, no idea where I am. He looked around at the fantasy forest. But hey, at least the air's breathable. A twig snapped behind him. Tony spun, repulsor raised, to find himself facing something else entirely. The figure stood barely 4 feet tall, with wild pink hair pulled into pigtails, goggles pushed up on her forehead, and a leather outfit covered in pockets and tool belts. Her eyes were bright with intelligence and curiosity, and she carried what appeared to be a rifle, though its design was baroque and impossible. "Well, well, well," the small woman said, her voice carrying a faint mechanical buzz. "What do we have here? That's not standard Stormwind armor. That's not standard anything armor." She circled Tony like a predator assessing prey, though her expression was more excited than threatening. "The energy signature from your arrival registered on my detectors from all the way in Iron Forge. Ripped through multiple layers of reality, it did. Very impressive, very dangerous." Tony kept his repulsor aimed at her, though something about her demeanor reminded him of an overeager engineer. "And you are?" Ginny Sparkwhistle, gnomish engineer, master tinkerer, and currently very curious about your malfunctioning technological marvel there. She pointed at his armor. "That's not goblin work. Too refined. Not gnomish either. Different design philosophy entirely. And that power source in your chest." Her eyes fixated on the arc reactor. "That's generating more energy per cubic centimeter than anything I've ever seen." Tony lowered his repulsor slightly. "This might not be a threat. This might be an opportunity. It's called an arc reactor. Miniaturized clean energy. And it's dying because whatever I flew through on the way here scrambled half my systems." Ginny's face lit up with the universal expression of an engineer confronted with an interesting problem. "Flew through? You mean the reality tear? Oh, that makes sense. Arcane energy of that magnitude would absolutely wreak havoc on technological systems, especially if they're not shielded against magical interference." She paused. "You're not from Azeroth at all, are you?" "Azeroth? Is that what this place is called?" Tony lowered his hand completely. "No, I'm from Earth. Different Earth, apparently, based on the whole Two Moons thing." Ginny's eyes went wide behind her goggles. A transdimensional traveler. The theoretical models suggested it was possible, but the energy requirements would be staggering. She paced in small circles. "The implications are extraordinary. If travel between realities is possible, then the multiverse theory is confirmed." "Yeah, it's great. Real exciting," Tony interrupted. "Right now, I'm more concerned with survival. Those soldiers back there seemed pretty eager to haul me in for questioning." "SI-7 will be hunting you," Ginny explained. "They don't like unknown magical anomalies. Too many bad experiences with demons and old god corruption." She looked Tony up and down. "Which is why someone with advanced technology from another reality is going to be very valuable to a lot of very dangerous people." Before Tony could respond, shouts echoed through the forest. The search had spread from the crater. Ginny grabbed Tony's arm with surprising strength. "Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe. I know a place in Stormwind's Dwarven district where we can hide and maybe fix that armor of yours." Tony hesitated for only a moment before following. He was operating blind in an unknown environment. Having a local guide who understood technology was his best option. They moved quickly through the forest until they reached a road where a mechanical mount waited. Something that looked like a mechanical ostrich constructed of brass and steel. "Hop on," Ginny instructed. Mechgineer's chopper. Fastest ground mount in my collection. Tony climbed on behind her, noting the craftsmanship. It was crude by his standards, but functional and showing genuine engineering ingenuity. The mount lurched forward with a burst of steam, carrying them down the road toward the massive city visible in the distance. Stormwind was unlike anything Tony had seen outside of fantasy films. Massive stone walls rose hundreds of feet, adorned with towers and battlements. As they passed through the main gates, Tony saw crowds of every fantasy race imaginable. Humans in various armor styles, dwarves with magnificent beards, tall, elegant elves with glowing eyes. The architecture was medieval stonework mixed with magical infrastructure. Crystals embedded in walls provided light. Portals shimmered with robed figures stepping through them. Ginny navigated through the crowded streets, eventually descending into a lower section where buildings were older and more densely packed. The Dwarven District. The architecture changed to incorporate more metal and stone, with forges visible through open doorways and the constant sound of hammers on anvils. She pulled the mount into a narrow alley, then through a concealed door into a workshop that made Tony's arc reactor flutter with something like nostalgia. It was organized chaos. Workbenches covered with partially assembled devices, walls lined with tools both familiar and alien, blueprints scattered everywhere. Several mechanical automatons stood dormant in corners. "Welcome to my workshop," Ginny announced, closing security measures. Blast shields lowered over windows. Runes on the doorframe glowed with magical protection. "We should be safe here for a while. The wards will hide your energy signature." Tony immediately began examining the workshop, his engineering mind cataloging everything. "This is impressive. Primitive by my standards, no offense, but the ingenuity is remarkable. You're working without any advanced electronics or computing power, yet you've achieved functional mechanical automation." "None taken," Ginny replied, pulling out tools and components. Gnomish engineering is about taking existing principles and pushing them to their limits. A bit of arcane enhancement helps too. She gestured to a workbench. "Let me see your armor up close. If I can understand its principles, maybe I can help stabilize it." Tony approached the bench, his armor retracting from his arms to reveal damaged components. The nanites crawled across his skin like living metal, trying to maintain their configurations despite catastrophic damage. Ginny's eyes went wide. By Mimiron's beard, it's self-repairing, or trying to be. The individual components are attempting to reconnect autonomously. She pulled out a magnifying device. "What's the base material?" "Programmable matter," Tony explained. "Nanites, molecular machines that can reconfigure based on commands from a central AI, which is currently offline. They're powered by the arc reactor, which is barely functioning after whatever energy field I passed through." Ginny looked up sharply. "You passed through raw arcane energy, probably mixed with void and fell given the tear's appearance. That kind of exposure would destabilize any technological system not specifically shielded against magical interference." She moved to a shelf, pulling down various components. "Standard technology and magic don't play well together on Azeroth. Your armor's fighting a battle it wasn't designed for. Without proper shielding, your systems will continue to degrade." Tony felt a chill. "So you're saying my armor is actively being damaged by just existing here?" "Essentially, yes. The ambient magical energy on Azeroth is much higher than what you're probably used to." Ginny returned with an armful of components. "But there might be a solution. We've developed methods to shield technology from magical interference. If we can adapt them to your armor's systems, we might stabilize it." For the next several hours, Tony worked alongside Ginny. An unlikely partnership. She explained Azeroth's principles of techno-magical integration while he shared concepts from his universe's pure technology. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they found common ground in engineering. "Your power source," Ginny said as they worked, carefully installing arcane insulators around Tony's arc reactor housing. It's generating energy through controlled fusion at a miniaturized scale. We've theorized about similar systems, but the containment field requirements would require massive infrastructure. Palladium-based arc reactor technology, Tony explained, watching as the gnomish modifications began stabilizing his armor's power fluctuations. The element was synthesized specifically for miniaturization. The magnetic bottle contains the reaction, while the energy output feeds directly into my armor systems. He paused. And keeps shrapnel from reaching my heart, but that's a whole other story. As they worked, distant explosions occasionally rumbled through the city. Ginny would pause, check monitoring devices, then continue working. Horde raid is escalating. Guards will be focused there, which buys us time. Tony tightened a connection on his gauntlet, watching with satisfaction as the nanites responded more smoothly. You mentioned demons earlier, and old gods. I need to understand what kind of threats exist in this world. Ginny sat back, wiping grease from her hands. The Burning Legion, an army of demons led by fallen titans, has tried to destroy Azeroth multiple times. The Old Gods, ancient evil entities imprisoned beneath the world, constantly work to corrupt from within. Then there's the Horde and Alliance conflict. Undead plagues, dragonflights, the Scourge, elemental invasions. She looked at Tony seriously. Azeroth is a world constantly at war, constantly on the edge of destruction. We survive because we adapt, because we fight. Tony recognized the tone. He'd heard it before from people who'd seen too much. And your technology has stagnated because you're always in crisis mode, always fighting the next threat instead of having time to innovate. Essentially, Ginny admitted, the most advanced technology comes from the Titans, ancient beings who shaped our world. We study their artifacts, try to understand their principles, but true innovation is rare, dangerous even. Too many experiments have gone wrong. Tony stood, testing his armor's mobility. The nanites were responding better. Power levels stabilized at 30%. Not full capability, but functional. Back home, I built my first arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps. Sometimes innovation comes from necessity. A sudden alarm blared through the workshop. Ginny rushed to her monitors, her expression darkening. SI-7 agents are sweeping the Dwarven district. Someone tipped them off. She began rapidly packing essential tools. We need to move, now. Tony's armor configured into combat readiness. Where? The Deep Run tram, Ginny replied, moving toward a concealed door. Underground transport connecting Stormwind to Ironforge. We can lose them in the maintenance tunnels. And I know people in Ironforge who can help. They descended through hidden passages, entering tunnels beneath Stormwind. The architecture was ancient, with modern infrastructure grafted onto old stonework. They reached the Deep Run tram station, a massive underground chamber where mechanical trams waited on tracks, disappearing into a tunnel beyond sight. A few travelers waited on the platform, but none paid attention as Tony and Ginny boarded. The vehicle lurched into motion with a hiss of steam, accelerating into the tunnel. Through reinforced glass windows, Tony could see the tunnel walls rushing past, occasionally opening into massive chambers where underground seas held strange aquatic creatures. This is remarkable, Tony admitted, examining the tram systems. You're working without computer controls, without modern electronics. Yet you've created a fully functional mass transit system through bedrock. The tram was built during the Third War, Ginny explained with pride. Gnomish engineers designed it, Dwarven workers constructed it. Provides safe, fast transport between kingdoms. The ride provided brief respite, allowing Tony to assess his situation. He was stranded in an alien universe on a world constantly threatened by apocalyptic dangers. His technology was barely functional. Multiple factions would want to capture him, and he had no clear idea how to return home. Ginny, he said quietly, that tear in reality I came through, would it still be there? Could I go back? The gnome's expression was sympathetic. Reality tears seal themselves quickly. By now, it's almost certainly closed. Even if it wasn't, passing through a second time would likely be fatal given your armor's current state. Tony absorbed this, forcing down rising panic. So I'm stuck here. For now, Ginny said. But Azeroth has mages who specialize in dimensional magic. If anyone can help you find a way home, it would be the Kirin Tor, the Mage Council in Dalaran. Dalaran, Tony repeated. A floating city, Ginny corrected, held aloft by magic, home to the most powerful mages in Azeroth. They study all forms of magic, including dimensional manipulation. If there's a way to send you home, they'd know it. The tram began to slow, approaching the Ironforge station. As they decelerated, Tony noticed something concerning on his sensors. Energy signatures behind them, moving fast. We've got company. Multiple contacts approaching from the Stormwind side. Ginny cursed in Gnomish. They followed us. Must be SI-7. She grabbed Tony's arm. When we reach Ironforge, we run. There's someone there who can help, but we need to reach him before SI-7 sets up a perimeter. The tram pulled into Ironforge Station, and the moment the doors opened, they were moving. The station was grander than Stormwind's, carved into living rock with dwarven precision. They emerged into Ironforge proper, and Tony had to pause to take it in. The entire city was carved inside a mountain, a massive chamber with multiple levels spiraling up toward a central forge that burned with visible heat. This way, Ginny urged, leading Tony through crowded streets. They descended into lower levels where workshops grew more specialized and crowds thinned. They reached a building marked with glowing runes. Ginny knocked in a specific pattern, and after a moment, the door swung open to reveal a dwarf with a gray beard reaching his belt and sharp eyes. Ginny spark whistle, the dwarf rumbled. Bringing trouble to me door again, are ye? The interesting kind, Borin, Ginny replied, pushing inside and pulling Tony with her. The kind that requires your particular expertise. The dwarf's eyes fixed on Tony, narrowing as he took in the damaged armor and arc reactor's glow. That's no goblin work. No gnome either. What in Kazmodan's name is that? A visitor from very far away, Ginny explained as Borin secured the door. Beyond even the great dark beyond, from another reality entirely. Borin's bushy eyebrows rose. Well now, that's a tale I want to hear. But first, let's see about hiding ye. He led them through his home, which was crammed with historical artifacts and ancient weapons. They descended into a workshop that made Ginny's look modest. This was a museum of Azeroth's technological history. Ancient Titan artifacts stood alongside dwarven siege engines, and in the center, a massive forge burned with heat far exceeding normal combustion temperatures. Borin Iron Shaper, Ginny introduced formally. Master weaponsmith, Titan artifact researcher, and one of the few people in Ironforge who won't immediately report a transdimensional visitor. Because I'm more interested in what his armor can teach us than in politics. Borin confirmed, circling Tony. That power source, lad. That's cleaner than anything I've seen. And the armor itself moves like it's alive. It's called nanotechnology, Tony explained. Programmable matter that responds to neural commands. The power source is an arc reactor, miniaturized fusion energy. Borin stroked his beard thoughtfully. Fusion. The Titans use similar principles in their megastructures, but nothing on this scale. How did ye achieve such miniaturization? Before Tony could answer, pounding echoed from upstairs. Open up in the name of King Rin and SI-7. We know you're harboring the anomaly. Borin didn't seem concerned. That door will hold for a good long while, reinforced with titansteel. He fixed Tony with a stern gaze. Now then, lad, Ginny tells me ye came through a reality tear. That about cover it? That's the summary, Tony confirmed. His armor sensors tracking multiple energy signatures surrounding the building. I need to find a way home. Ginny mentioned the Kirin Tor in Dalaran might be able to help. Aye, they might, Borin agreed. But getting to Dalaran won't be easy with SI-7 looking for you. He moved to a workbench, pulling out a crystal that pulsed with internal light. I can get you to Dalaran, but there's a price. Knowledge. Your armor's principles. Your power source's design. Not to copy, but to understand. Tony's eyes narrowed. What kind of price? Just understanding, lad, Boren replied. We've been studying Titan technology for centuries. What you carry might be key to understanding principles we've long puzzled over. It was reasonable, Tony admitted. There's a problem. My technology in the wrong hands could be catastrophic. I've seen what happens when advanced weapons fall into corrupt hands. As have we, lad, Boren said gravely. Azeroth's history is littered with power corrupted, knowledge twisted, but it's also filled with innovation, saving us from extinction. The pounding intensified. We have authorization to breach. Final warning. Boren sighed. Decision time, lad. Do we make a deal, or do I hand ye over? Tony looked at the dwarf, at Ginny standing nearby with hope in her eyes. He thought about his own world, about Hydra, and all the organizations that had tried to steal his technology. But he also thought about people like Rhodey and Peter, who used technology to protect. I'll share what I know, Tony decided, but carefully. I'll teach you principles, not provide blueprints. Understand the science rather than just copy the result. Boren grinned. That's all I ever wanted, lad. He pressed a stone in the floor, revealing a passage descending deeper. Old Titan passage that predates Ironforge, leads to Uldaman. They descended as breaching sounds succeeded above. Shouts echoed as SI-7 agents flooded in. But by then, they were deep in the Titan passage, moving through architecture that made Tony's mind reel. The walls were perfectly smooth, not carved but formed. Glowing lines of energy ran through stone like circuit pathways. The Titans were ancient beings who shaped Azeroth, Boren explained. They built machines to maintain the world, facilities deep underground that still function millennia after their departure. Tony examined the walls with his sensors. The energy signatures are unlike anything I've encountered, both electromagnetic and something else. Magic, Ginny supplied. The Titans used arcane energy integrated with technology so completely they're inseparable. That's the secret we've been trying to unlock. They walked for hours through Titan passages, occasionally passing massive chambers filled with dormant machinery of impossible scale. Eventually, the passage opened into a spherical chamber easily 100 meters in diameter, walls covered in constellations of lights. At the center floated a platform, and on it stood a machine pulsing with power. A Titan teleportation hub, Boren announced, one of the few still functional. With the right adjustments, I can set it to transport ye to Dalaran. Tony approached the controls, his armor interfacing with the technology. Data flooded his systems, alien programming languages. This is incredible. The energy requirements for matter transmission across planetary distances should be astronomical. The Chamber of Heart provides power, Boren explained. The world soul of Azeroth itself. As long as the world lives, their machines function. He looked at Tony seriously, which is why the old gods are so dangerous. They're trying to corrupt that world soul. Tony absorbed this. You're not just fighting for survival. You're fighting to protect your entire world's consciousness. Aye, Boren confirmed. Now ye understand why we're cautious about new technology. The platform powered up, energy coalescing in swirling patterns of blue and gold. Tony's sensors registered power levels that should have been impossible. Coordinates are set for Dalaran's underground arrival chamber, Boren said. The Kirin Tor maintain it for emergency arrivals. You'll be detained for questioning, but that's better than SI-7. Ginny stepped forward. I'm coming with you. You'll need someone who can speak to the Kirin Tor. As do I, Boren added. I'll send a message ahead, vouching for your non-hostile intent. Tony nodded appreciatively. If this goes wrong, associating with me could damage your reputations. Boren laughed deeply. I've had my reputation questioned since I started suggesting we could learn from Titan technology instead of just worshipping it. The platform's energy reached critical levels. Time to go. SI-7 will have traced us here. Tony and Ginny stepped onto the platform. Energy enveloped them, and Tony felt his armor systems fluctuate wildly. For the second time since arriving on Azeroth, he experienced the sensation of being disassembled and reassembled at the molecular level. When reality reformed, Tony found himself in a circular chamber constructed of white marble veined with glowing purple lines. Massive crystalline pillars supported a domed ceiling, and magical wards pulsed around the room's perimeter. Standing around the platform were a dozen figures in purple robes, their hands glowing with barely contained spells. "Remain still," commanded the lead figure, a high elf with glowing blue eyes and absolute authority. "You have arrived in Dalaran without proper authorization. Identify yourselves." Ginny raised her hands placatingly. "Archmage Varisa, I am Ginny Sparkwhistle of Ironforge. I come with Boran Ironshaper's seal regarding a matter of dimensional significance." She gestured to Tony. "This is Anthony Stark, a trans-dimensional traveler who arrived on Azeroth through an uncontrolled reality breach. We seek the Kirin Tor's assistance in helping him return home." The Archmage's glowing eyes fixed on Tony, and he felt something probe at his mind, a gentle but insistent pressure. Interesting. His mind is shielded by technology, not magic, and the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. She lowered her hands slightly. "We received Ironshaper's message moments before your arrival. The Kirin Tor Council has granted provisional audience, but you will be accompanied by guards." Tony's armor remained on alert. "I appreciate the hospitality, even with the security detail. I'm not here to cause problems. I just want to go home." "Many have said such words before attempting to destroy our city," Varisa replied coolly. "Dalaran has been attacked by demons, dragons, and undead. We survived by being vigilant." She gestured. "Follow me. The council awaits in the Violet Citadel." They were escorted through Dalaran's streets, and Tony was struck by the surreal nature of it all. The city floated in the sky, held aloft by magic so powerful he could feel it humming through the stones. Buildings defied normal architecture, with some structures floating independently, connected by bridges of solid light. Mages walked alongside warriors in enchanted armor. Arcane constructs served as guards. They approached the Violet Citadel, a massive tower spiraling toward the sky, its walls shimmering with protective enchantments. Inside, rooms seemed larger than their exterior dimensions, and staircases defied gravity. They ascended to a grand chamber where 6 figures waited on elevated thrones arranged in a semicircle. The Council of 6 recognizes Anthony Stark and Ginny Sparkwhistle, announced the central figure, a human male with gray hair and stern authority. "I am Archmage Khadgar, leader of the Kirin Tor. We have reviewed Boran Ironshaper's testimony and examined residual energy from your arrival point. You claim to be from another reality." Tony stepped forward, forcing confidence despite being surrounded by reality-warping mages. "That's correct. I'm from Earth, but not this Earth. Different universe entirely. I was working on experimental dimensional research when something went wrong. I was pulled through what you call a reality tear and crashed in Elwyn Forest." One of the other council members, a female night elf with silver hair, leaned forward. "I am Archmage Mordent. The energy signature suggests you passed through the twisting nether, the space between realities. Such passage should have destroyed you instantly. How did you survive?" "My armor," Tony explained, gesturing to the damaged Iron Man suit. "It's designed to withstand extreme conditions, though not dimensional transit. The shielding held long enough, but the damage was severe." Khadgar descended from his throne, approaching Tony carefully. "May I examine your armor? I promise no harm, but understanding technology that allowed dimensional transit could be invaluable." Tony hesitated, then nodded. Trust had to start somewhere. "Go ahead." But be careful around the arc reactor. It's volatile. The Archmage's hands glowed with soft blue light as he passed them over Tony's armor. His expression shifted from curiosity to amazement to concern. Remarkable. This isn't just technology, it's integrated with your biological systems. The power source is connected to your cardiovascular system. His glowing eyes met Tony's. This is keeping you alive. Long story involving shrapnel and necessity, Tony replied. The arc reactor powers my armor and the electromagnet keeping metal fragments from reaching my heart. I built it in less than ideal circumstances. And you've miniaturized plasma containment to this degree, Khadgar marveled. The energy density should cause catastrophic failure, yet it remains stable. The principles are extraordinary. Another council member, a gnome even smaller than Ginny, spoke up. I am Millhouse Manastorm, and I must ask the obvious question. If you possess technology this advanced, why should we help you leave? Imagine what Azeroth could achieve with such knowledge. The question hung in the air, and Tony recognized the dangerous ground. This was the same conversation he'd had with governments and military organizations. Because that technology in the wrong hands could be catastrophic. Back in my reality, I've spent years keeping my inventions away from people who would weaponize them. I don't know enough about your world to risk introducing that kind of power. Yet you've already shared knowledge with Boren and Ginny, Mordant observed. Knowledge likely spreading through engineering circles now. Principles, not applications, Tony corrected. I taught them theory, scientific concepts. I didn't give them blueprints. There's a difference between sharing knowledge and handing over weapons. Khadgar nodded slowly. A distinction I appreciate. The Kirin Tor has long debated the ethics of knowledge sharing. He returned to his throne. However, your situation presents unique challenges. The reality tear that brought you here has sealed. Creating a new one would require enormous power and precise calculations to ensure it leads to your specific reality rather than infinite alternatives. A worgen with silver fur growled softly before speaking. I am Archmage Erugal. The Kirin Tor has experience with dimensional magic, but nothing on this scale. However, there is one place in Azeroth where barriers between realities are naturally thin. The Nexus. Malagos's former sanctum in Northrend, built on the most powerful convergence of ley lines, specifically for manipulating arcane energies at cosmic scale. Northrend? Tony repeated. I'm guessing that's not a short walk. It's a frozen continent thousands of miles north, Ginny explained. Once home to the Lich King, still incredibly dangerous. Khadgar conjured an illusion in the air, showing a map. Tony watched as it zoomed to show a massive ice-covered continent. The Nexus is located here, in Koldara. The blue dragonflight once guarded it, though their numbers are greatly diminished. To reach it, you would need to travel by portal to Northrend, then make your way across hostile territory. I'll do whatever it takes to get home, Tony said firmly, but I need to repair my armor first. It's barely functional. Millhouse's eyes gleamed, which brings us back to the knowledge exchange. Help us understand your technology well enough to assist in repairing it, and we'll provide you with everything you need to reach the Nexus. It was reasonable, more than reasonable. All right, I'll work with your engineers and mages. We'll repair my armor together, and I'll teach what I can. But ground rules, no weaponization of what I show you. No attempts to replicate arc reactor technology without proper safety protocols. And absolute transparency. If I think something is too dangerous to share, you respect that. Khadgar conferred briefly with other council members through telepathic communication. Finally, he nodded. The Kirin Tor accepts these terms. You will be provided with a workshop in the Citadel and access to our most skilled artificers. Ginny Sparkwhistle may remain as your liaison if she agrees. I agree, Ginny said immediately. This is the most exciting engineering project I've ever been part of. Then we have an accord, Khadgar declared. You will be housed in the Citadel under light security, more for your protection than restriction. News of your arrival is spreading, and not all factions in Azeroth will view you as benignly as we do. Tony's armor sensors picked up a sudden spike in magical energy from outside. Alarms began to blare throughout the city. Khadgar's expression darkened as he received a telepathic message. It seems we spoke too soon. The Horde has learned of your presence. They're demanding you be turned over to their custody, claiming you're too dangerous to remain solely in Alliance hands. Through the chamber's windows, Tony could see dark portals opening in the sky around Dalaran. From them emerged flying creatures bearing riders in different armor. Orcs, trolls, and undead, flying on everything from giant bats to skeletal dragons. They wouldn't dare attack Dalaran, Mordant said, though her tone suggested uncertainty. We're neutral ground, protected by treaty. Treaties are only as strong as the fear of consequences, Khadgar replied grimly. The Horde leadership sees your technology, Mr. Stark, as worth risking conflict over. He raised his hands and magical barriers shimmered into existence around the citadel. Council, defensive positions. We will not surrender a guest under our protection, but we will also seek to avoid open conflict. Tony watched as Horde forces took up positions surrounding Dalaran, not attacking, but making their presence known. This was a standoff, and he was the prize. I'm really getting tired of being the most popular guy at every party, Tony muttered. A massive orc materialized on one of Dalaran's landing platforms via portal, flanked by guards. Even from a distance, Tony could see this was someone important. The orc wore armor adorned with symbols of rank and carried himself with absolute authority. That's Warchief Hellscream, Ginny whispered, leader of the Horde. If he's here personally, this is serious. Khadgar's projection appeared on the landing platform, a magical construct allowing communication without leaving the citadel. Warchief Hellscream, you come to Dalaran with a show of force. This violates the neutrality accords. The Warchief's voice boomed across the city, magically amplified. The Kirin Tor harbors a weapon of unknown power, technology that could shift the balance between Horde and Alliance. We demand he be brought to neutral ground where both factions can ensure he poses no threat to Azeroth. Mr. Stark is under Kirin Tor protection, Khadgar's projection replied. He has committed no crimes and seeks only to return to his own reality. We will not surrender him to either faction. Hellscream's expression darkened. Then the Kirin Tor chooses sides. Know that the Horde will remember. The War Chief's words cut off as new portals opened throughout Dalaran, but these weren't Horde colors. These portals shimmered with sickly green and purple energy. Fill magic that made Tony's armor sensors scream warnings. From them poured demons, twisted creatures of living shadow and flame. They attacked both the gathered Horde forces and the city itself with mindless fury. Legion, someone shouted. The Burning Legion is invading. Chaos erupted across Dalaran. The Horde forces, rather than retreating, immediately engaged the demons alongside Dalaran's defenders. Whatever their disagreement about Tony, it was forgotten in the face of this greater threat. Khadgar's projection vanished as the Archmage returned his focus to the Citadel. Mr. Stark, this is too convenient to be coincidence. The Legion has been dormant since we defeated them at the Tomb of Sargeras. For them to attack now when you arrive. Tony's mind raced through implications. You think they're here because of me? How would they even know? The Legion exists across multiple realities, Mordant explained, her hands weaving defensive spells. If you truly passed through the Twisting Nether, your presence would have been noted by their demon lords. Technology from another universe would be invaluable to them. A massive demon, easily 20 feet tall with wings of flame and a sword dripping molten metal, crashed through the Citadel's outer wall. The magical barriers held, but barely. The creature's eyes fixed on Tony with obvious intent. The prize, the demon rumbled, its voice like grinding stone. Lord Kil'jaeden demands the Artificer from beyond. Your knowledge will fuel the Legion's eternal crusade. Tony's repulsors powered up, channeling the last reserves of his arc reactor's energy. I'm going to go ahead and decline that invitation. He fired both repulsors at maximum power, the beams striking the demon's chest. The creature staggered back, surprised by the force, but its Fel-enhanced armor absorbed most of the damage. Impressive, the demon acknowledged, but insufficient. The Kirin Tor Council unleashed their magic. Arcane bolts and frost spears and shadow lances, all striking the demon simultaneously. Combined with Tony's repulsor blasts, they forced the creature back through the breach it had created. Khadgar sealed the wall with a gesture, magical energy reconstructing stone. "We cannot hold them off forever," the Archmage said, breathing heavily. "The Legion has committed significant forces to this attack. They want you badly, Mr. Stark." Tony checked his power levels, 8% remaining. Maybe one more significant fight before the arc reactor went critical. Then we don't give them the chance. Get me to that workshop. If I'm going to be stuck in a demonic siege, I might as well use the time to fix my armor. Khadgar nodded. "Ginny, take him to the secured workshop on sub-level 3. Millhouse, Aragal, go with them and provide assistance. The rest of the council will coordinate the defense." As they moved through the Citadel's halls, sounds of battle echoed from outside. Explosions, screams, the crackle of magic, the roar of demons. Tony caught glimpses through windows of carnage below. Demons fighting against unified Horde and Alliance forces. Mages unleashing devastating spells. Dragons diving from the sky to engage flying demon lords. "This is because of me," Tony said quietly. "All these people dying because I accidentally fell into your universe." "No," Ginny replied firmly. "This is because the Burning Legion is evil and sees any advantage as worth taking. You didn't ask to come here, and you're not responsible for their choices." They reached the workshop, a vast chamber filled with equipment bridging technology and magic. Enchanted forges burned with controlled fire. Workbenches held both mundane tools and crystalline instruments pulsing with power. And in the center, a containment field waited, designed for safely working with volatile materials. Tony immediately began assessing what was available. Millhouse and Aragal positioned themselves at the entrance, magical wards springing up to reinforce the doors. "We'll hold this position," Millhouse declared. "You focus on repairs." For the next several hours, Tony worked with an intensity born of desperation. Ginny assisted, her knowledge of Azerothian engineering complementing his understanding of advanced technology. Aragal provided insights into how magical shielding could protect the armor's systems from ambient arcane energy. Together, they created something neither universe had seen before, technology incorporating magical principles into its fundamental design. The nanites were modified to accept arcane energy as a secondary power source, reducing strain on the arc reactor. Magical wards were etched into the armor structure at the molecular level, providing protection against both physical and magical attacks. "This is extraordinary," Aragal growled, watching the nanites respond to both technological commands and magical inputs. "You're creating a hybrid system that operates on principles from both universes." "It's the only way forward," Tony replied, carefully calibrating the new systems. "My technology can't exist in your environment without adaptation. Rather than fight that reality, I'm embracing it." The arc reactor pulsed with renewed strength as modifications took hold. Power levels began climbing. 15%, 20, 30. The armor reformed around Tony, more complete than it had been since his arrival. The nanites flowed smoothly, incorporating Azerothian materials and magical enhancements. A tremendous explosion rocked the citadel. Millhouse stumbled, his concentration breaking. The magical wards on the door flickered and died. "They've breached the lower levels. The demons are coming." Tony stood, his armor now at 60% capacity and stabilizing. The helmet formed completely for the first time since arrival. HUD systems coming online with Jarvis's voice, corrupted and stuttering but functional. "Boss, systems, online, multiple, hostiles, detected." "Jarvis?" Tony felt a surge of hope. You're back? Partial restoration, magical interference, limits, functionality. It's enough, Tony said firmly. Time to show these demons why you don't mess with Iron Man. The workshop doors exploded inward. Demons poured through, smaller than the one that had attacked the council chamber but numerous and ferocious. They wielded weapons of fell-forged metal and cast spells of shadow and fire. Tony engaged his flight system, rising above the initial wave. His repulsors fired with renewed strength, enhanced by magical modifications. Each blast now carried both kinetic force and arcane energy, punching through demonic armor with devastating effect. Ginny deployed mechanical spider constructs that fired rockets into demon ranks. Millhouse unleashed fireballs while Aragorn raised skeletal warriors from the stone floor to engage demons in melee. Together, they held the workshop against wave after wave. But Tony could see the tactical situation deteriorating. The Citadel was under assault from multiple directions. Even with Horde and Alliance forces working together, the Legion's numbers were overwhelming. We need to evacuate, Tony said, blasting another demon. This position isn't sustainable. Khadgar's voice echoed through magical communication. Agreed. I'm opening emergency portals to get non-combatants out. But Mr. Stark, you need to reach the Nexus now. The Legion won't stop as long as you're in Dalaran. Draw them away by heading to where you need to go anyway. The logic was sound, even if Tony hated it. How do I get to Northrend? I'll open a portal directly to Koldara, as close to the Nexus as possible. But understand, the region is not safe. Remnants of the Blue Dragonflight guard it, and they're not always friendly. You'll face whatever Legion forces follow you through. I've handled worse odds, Tony said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Ginny, you should stay here where it's safer. The gnome shook her head stubbornly. The Nexus is filled with ancient technology. You'll need a guide who understands it. I'm coming. Before Tony could argue, a portal shimmered into existence in the workshop. Through it, Tony could see a frozen wasteland, crystalline structures jutting from ice, and a sky filled with aurora that had nothing to do with natural phenomena. Go now, Khadgar urged. I'll seal the portal behind you and redirect the Legion's attention. May the light guide you. Tony grabbed Ginny and flew through the portal, his armor systems adjusting to the sudden temperature drop as they emerged into the frozen hell of Northrend. Behind them, the portal sealed with a flash of arcane energy. They stood on an ice shelf overlooking a valley filled with enormous crystalline structures humming with barely contained energy. The Nexus rose in the center, a massive floating fortress of crystal and magic that defied physics. Welcome to Koldara, Ginny said, her breath frosting in frigid air. One of the most magically powerful and physically hostile places on Azeroth. Tony's sensors were going haywire. Those crystal structures, they're not just decorative, they're focusing arcane energy from the ley lines, concentrating it in the Nexus. Exactly, Ginny confirmed. Malagos built this to manipulate magic at a planetary scale. If anywhere can tear open a passage to your reality, it's here. A roar split the frozen air. From behind a crystal structure emerged a dragon, but unlike anything Tony had seen in movies. This was massive, easily the size of a passenger jet, with scales that shimmered blue and crackled with arcane lightning. Its eyes glowed with predatory intelligence. Intruders, the dragon rumbled, its voice resonating with power. You dare approach the Nexus uninvited. The Blue Dragonflight may be diminished, but we still guard our sanctum. Tony raised his hands in what he hoped was non-threatening while keeping repulsors ready. We're not here to attack. I need to use the Nexus to return to my home reality. I'm from another universe, not a threat to Azeroth. The dragon's eyes narrowed, examining Tony with senses beyond normal vision. You carry strange magic, not of this world, and you gnome, you bear the scent of Dalaran scholars. The dragon landed, snow exploding around its massive form. I am Terra Lagosa, daughter of Terrigan. Explain your presence quickly before I decide your invaders deserving of incineration. Ginny stepped forward bravely despite clearly being terrified. The Kirin Tor sent us. Anthony Stark arrived on Azeroth through an uncontrolled dimensional breach. The Burning Legion is hunting him for his knowledge. We need the Nexus to send him home before the Legion launches a full invasion to capture him. Terralagosa considered this, her massive head tilting. The Legion hunts you? That explains the demonic portals I sensed opening near Dalaran. She growled, vibrating the ice beneath their feet. My flight has suffered greatly at the Legion's hands. If using the Nexus to banish you also denies them a prize, then I will permit it. She gestured with a wing toward the floating fortress. But know this, mortal from beyond. The Nexus is powerful but dangerous. Malagos's experiments with controlling arcane energy drove him to madness. The forces contained within are barely stable. Attempting dimensional manipulation could destroy not just you, but this entire region. I'll be careful, Tony promised. Though he had no idea if he could keep that promise. I'm an engineer. I understand the risks of working with unstable energy systems. Terralagosa snorted, a blast of frost accompanying the sound. We shall see. Follow me, and do not stray. Koldara is home to more than just my flight. Arcane elementals, frozen undead, and creatures drawn to concentrated magic all lurk in the ice. She launched herself into the air with powerful wing thrusts, circling above them. Tony activated his flight system, lifting off with Ginny secured in his arms. The armor's magical modifications hummed smoothly, drawing power from both the arc reactor and ambient arcane energy. As they flew toward the Nexus, Tony marveled at the engineering on display. The crystalline structures weren't just buildings, they were machinery, channeling and focusing magical energy with precision rivaling any of his designs. Ley lines were visible as streams of blue light flowing through ice and air, converging on the central fortress. They landed on a platform carved from a single massive crystal. The surface was perfectly smooth and etched with mathematical formulas Tony recognized as advanced physics, though expressed in symbols he'd never seen. The Nexus was built by the Titans and later modified by Malagos, Terralagosa explained, resuming humanoid form in a flash of magic. She now appeared as a tall woman with blue hair and eyes still glowing with draconic power. The inner chambers contain instruments capable of detecting and manipulating arcane energy across dimensional boundaries. She led them through corridors that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Architecture that hurt to look at directly. Tony's armor sensors struggled to map the interior, constantly revising models as spatial relationships shifted. They entered a central chamber that took Tony's breath away. It was spherical, easily 200 meters in diameter, with every surface covered in crystalline instruments and mathematical inscriptions. At the center floated a massive array of focusing crystals arranged in complex geometric patterns. Throughout it all, arcane energy flowed in visible currents. This is the most advanced facility I've ever seen, Tony admitted. This rivals anything on Earth, any Earth. The Titans shaped worlds, Terralagosa said with pride. This chamber can manipulate fundamental forces of reality itself. She moved to a control panel, her hands dancing across crystalline interfaces. But even with all this power, sending you home is not guaranteed. I will need to attune the Nexus to your unique energy signature. Trace it back through the twisting nether to find your specific reality among infinite possibilities. Tony approached the central array, his armor interfacing with ancient technology. Data flooded his systems, mathematical formulas describing reality at its most fundamental level. This is incredible. These equations describe quantum mechanics, string theory, multiversal topology, all integrated into a single framework. Ginny was examining peripheral systems. The power draw will require tapping directly into the ley line convergence. The arc reactor alone won't be sufficient, which will attract attention, Terralagosa warned. Every magical being within 1,000 miles will sense the power spike. And if the Legion is still hunting you, they will come. Then we work fast, Tony decided. Ginny, help me establish the connection between my arc reactor and the Nexus systems. We'll use my power signature as the template for the dimensional search. Terralagosa, set up the focusing array to scan the twisting nether for reality tears matching my energy profile. They worked in focused coordination, three beings from vastly different backgrounds united in common purpose. Tony modified his arc reactor's output to interface with Titan technology. Ginny bridged the gap between Azerothian magical systems and Tony's technology. Terralagosa channeled the Nexus's power with the precision of someone who'd studied it for centuries. The chamber began to pulse with increasing energy. The floating crystals rotated faster, their arrangement shifting into new configurations. Arcane lightning arced between surfaces, and the very air hummed with barely contained power. I'm detecting multiple dimensional signatures, Terralagosa reported, her eyes glowing brilliantly as she interfaced directly with the Nexus. Thousands of realities, all with similar but distinct physical laws. I'm narrowing the search based on your energy signature, but this will take time. Tony monitored the power draw. We're pulling more energy than I've ever worked with. If this destabilizes, the explosion will be visible from orbit. Comforting thought, Ginny muttered, frantically adjusting power flow regulators. A proximity alarm blared. Terralagosa's expression darkened. They're here. Demons, dozens of them. Approaching the Nexus from multiple vectors. Tony's HUD showed incoming hostiles. Jarvis, any suggestions? Recommend. Continue. Dimensional. Search. I will coordinate. Defenses. Terralagosa shifted back into draconic form. I will hold them off. Complete your work, Iron Man. Your departure is Azeroth's best defense against this invasion. She launched herself out of the chamber, her roar shaking crystalline walls. Moments later, battle sounds erupted outside. We're not gonna make it, Ginny said, watching power levels climb toward critical. The dimensional scan requires at least 10 more minutes, and those demons will breach the chamber long before then. Tony's mind raced through possibilities. Ginny, can the Nexus's power be weaponized? Could we channel it into a defensive burst? The gnome's eyes widened. Theoretically, yes. The arcane energy could be redirected through the crystalline structures surrounding the Nexus. It would create a pulse that would devastate anything within range, including us if we're not careful, Tony noted. But if we time it right, we can eliminate the demon forces and give ourselves time to complete the scan. They worked rapidly, Tony using his armor systems to calculate firing solutions while Ginny configured the Nexus's external crystals to focus energy outward. It was brilliant and terrifying. The chamber's walls suddenly cracked as something massive impacted from outside. A fell lord, even larger than the one that had attacked Dalaran, was tearing its way through crystalline structure. Its eyes burned with green fire. You cannot escape the Legion's reach, Artificer. Lord Kil'jaeden himself has marked you. Your knowledge will serve us, and your world will be next to fall. Tony's repulsors charged to maximum. I've got bad news for your boss. I don't play well with others, and I really don't like being hunted. He fired, striking the Fael Lord with enough force to stagger the massive demon. Ginny activated her combat constructs, mechanical spiders and gnomish battle suits emerging from her pack to engage smaller demons pouring through the breach. But they were overwhelming in number. For every demon destroyed, 2 more appeared. The Nexus's power continued building, but demons would reach the central chamber before the dimensional scan completed. Tony made a split-second decision. Jarvis, can you complete the dimensional search autonomously? Affirmative. Once. Parameters. Fully. Established. Then do it. Ginny finished setting up the energy pulse and activated on my mark. I'm gonna buy us time. Tony flew toward the Fael Lord, his armor systems at maximum output. He couldn't win this fight, but he could delay it. The Fiel Lord's massive sword swung in an arc that would have bisected him if connected. Tony dodged, flight system responding with precision, and fired repulsors at the demon's face. The blast scored across its features, causing it to roar in pain. "You dare strike at me, mortal! I am Azerothian the Devourer, champion of the Legion's infinite crusade." The demon lunged forward with impossible speed. Tony barely avoided the attack, his armor taking a glancing blow that sent systems offline. Jarvis, status. Hull, integrity, 73%. Power, systems. Fluctuating. Tony fired his missiles, enhanced projectiles tracking toward Azerothian with unerring accuracy. They detonated against the demon's armor in explosions that would have destroyed a building, but the Fiel Lord merely stumbled. "I'm really starting to hate this universe," Tony muttered, checking power reserves. 40% and dropping fast. He couldn't maintain this level of combat much longer. Terralagosa crashed through the chamber's ceiling, her draconic form battered and bleeding. She landed heavily, breathing ice and arcane energy at swarming demons. There are too many. More portals are opening. The Legion is committing significant forces. Tony flew to her side, providing covering fire. "How long until the energy pulse is ready?" 2 minutes, Ginny called back, but the power buildup is unstable. If it goes off prematurely, it could tear the Nexus apart. And if it doesn't go off at all, the demons tear us apart. Tony replied, "Not great options either way." The dimensional scan suddenly chimed completion. Jarvis's voice, stronger than before, announced, "Target, reality, located, dimensional, coordinates, locked, portal, can be established." Tony's heart leapt. Home. A way back was finally within reach, but looking around at the battle, at Terralagosa bleeding from dozens of wounds, at Ginny desperately trying to maintain control, at swarms of demons, he realized the terrible truth. If I open a portal now, the Legion follows me through. I lead them straight to my universe, to Earth, to everyone I'm trying to protect. Terralagosa's eyes met his, understanding dawning. "Then you must not open the portal. Or I open it, but make sure nothing can follow," Tony finished. He looked at the massive energy building in the Nexus, enough power to devastate everything within kilometers. Enough to destroy the demons, the chamber, and anyone foolish enough to remain inside when it detonated. "No," Ginny protested. "There has to be another way. We can fight them off, wait for reinforcements." "Reinforcements that will arrive too late," Tony said gently. "And even if we survive this wave, the Legion won't stop. As long as I'm in your universe, they'll keep coming, keep attacking, keep destroying." He activated the portal sequence, watching as reality began to tear in the chamber's center. Through the opening, he caught glimpses of his own universe, his lab, familiar technology. Home. "Terralagosa, get Ginny out of here. Get clear of the Nexus's blast radius." The dragon shifter shook her head. "I will not abandon you. The blue dragonflight does not flee from battle." "This isn't about bravery, it's about math," Tony replied. "If I set off that energy pulse with the portal open, the feedback will travel back through the dimensional tear. It'll seal the pathway permanently, make it impossible for anyone to follow. But anyone still in the Nexus when it happens." He didn't need to finish. Azerothian roared in triumph, seeing the portal. "Yes, open the way to your world. The Legion will feast on a fresh reality." The Fiel Lord charged toward the portal, and Tony intercepted, firing everything he had. Repulsors, missiles, unibeam, every weapon system unleashed at maximum power. The Fiel Lord staggered but didn't fall. "You cannot stop us all, mortal. More will come, always more." Ginny's voice cut through the chaos. "Tony, I've modified the energy pulse. If you channel your arc reactor into the array at the moment of detonation, it'll create a resonance cascade. The explosion will be directed entirely into the twisting nether, sealing not just this portal, but preventing any new ones from opening in this region for years." Tony processed the information. That means my arc reactor will be destroyed. I die. Or, Ginny said, tears streaming down her face, you go through the portal first, then trigger the cascade remotely. You live, the Legion is stopped, and the dimensional pathways are sealed. It was the perfect solution, except for one problem. By the time I'm through and set up the remote trigger, the demons will have followed me. Tony looked at his arc reactor, glowing steady and bright, the thing that had kept him alive for years. He'd always known, someday, the arc reactor might be the price of doing the right thing. Jarvis, can you calculate the exact timing needed to trigger the cascade after I'm through, but before anything can follow? Affirmative. Window of 0.37 seconds. Margin for error, minimal. Minimal. That's practically generous. Tony flew toward the portal, keeping himself between it and advancing demons. He looked back at Ginny and Terralagosa. Thank you, both of you, for everything. Tony, no! Ginny shouted. There has to be another way. There is always another way, Tony replied, but not always one that lets everyone survive. Sometimes the best we can do is make sure the right people make it out. He dove through the portal, feeling the familiar sensation of his own universe enveloping him. He materialized in his lab, alarms immediately blaring. Through the portal behind him, he could see Azerothian and his demon army charging toward the opening. Jarvis, trigger the cascade, now. Triggering in 3, 2. Time seemed to slow. Tony watched as the portal began to collapse, energy from the Nexus's detonation flooding through. The demons were meters away, claws outstretched. 1, the cascade hit. Energy beyond measure flooded through the portal, a wave of arcane power mixed with the arc reactor's unique signature. Tony's armor shut down instantly, every system overloaded. The portal collapsed violently, reality sealing itself with a thunderous crack that shattered windows throughout Stark Tower. And in his chest, the arc reactor flickered one final time before going dark. Tony collapsed to the floor, his armor inert, power dead. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The electromagnet keeping shrapnel from his heart was offline. He had minutes at most. Boss, systems, failing, emergency, protocols, initiating. Jarvis's voice was fading, but the AI was still trying. Through blurring vision, Tony saw his workshop's robotic arms spring to life, moving toward him with medical equipment. Dumb E, his first robot, carefully deployed emergency medical nanites, programmed for exactly this scenario. The nanites swarmed toward his chest, working frantically to keep the shrapnel from moving, to keep him alive just a little longer. Sir, emergency services have been notified. Jarvis managed. Medical teams en route. Estimate 2 minutes. Tony's eyes drifted to the sealed space where the portal had been. Through the haze of encroaching unconsciousness, he wondered if Ginny and Terralagosa had made it out, if Dalaran had survived, if Azeroth would be safe from the Legion, at least for a while. He wondered if he'd ever know. Darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. His last conscious thought was that he'd done it, kept his technology out of the wrong hands, protected his universe from an invasion it wasn't equipped to handle, and maybe, just maybe, given Azeroth a chance to find its own way forward. Then there was nothing but the sound of sirens and the mechanical whirring of Dummy refusing to give up on his creator. Tony Stark awoke to the steady beeping of medical equipment and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. His chest ached with a deep, persistent pain that was somehow different from the constant presence the arc reactor had provided. He raised a hand, feeling bandages and medical sensors, but no glow of arc reactor light. "Welcome back, boss." Jarvis's voice came through room speakers. "You have been unconscious for approximately 47 hours following catastrophic arc reactor failure." Tony tried to speak, his throat dry. A cup of water appeared, held by a robotic arm. He sipped gratefully. "What's the damage?" Multiple surgeons worked for 18 hours to remove all shrapnel fragments from your chest cavity. The emergency nanites successfully prevented immediate fatality, allowing time for medical intervention. You no longer require the arc reactor to survive. Tony absorbed this slowly. So I'm not dying anymore? Not from shrapnel-related cardiac complications, no. Dr. Cho utilized her cradle technology combined with Wakandan medical nanites to complete the procedure. Strategic planning rather than fortune, Tony murmured. He sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. How much of what happened did you record? All events following your return through the dimensional portal were recorded. The dimensional travel itself was not captured, though your armor's internal logs contain partial data from your time in the alternate reality. Tony looked down at his chest, at bandages covering where the arc reactor had been for so many years. The weight was gone, the constant hum and warmth that had been part of his life. It felt like losing a piece of himself, even if that piece had been slowly killing him. Jarvis, pull up the armor's logs from Azeroth. I need to know if the cascade worked, if the portal sealed properly. Sensor data indicates the dimensional pathway collapsed successfully. Cross-reality travel to that specific universe should now be impossible for a minimum of several decades, possibly permanently. Tony felt relief wash over him. They'd done it. Azeroth was safe from easy Legion access, and his universe was protected from an invasion it had no context for understanding. Sir, there is one anomaly in the data, Jarvis continued. Approximately 3 minutes before you triggered the cascade, a small object passed through the portal from the Azeroth side. It materialized in your laboratory. Tony's attention sharpened. Show me. A holographic display appeared, showing a small crystalline device, no larger than a thumb drive, that pulsed with faint blue light. Its surface was etched with the same mathematical formulas he'd seen throughout the Nexus. That's Titan technology, Tony said, recognizing the design principles. Ginny must have thrown it through before I sealed the portal. Jarvis zoomed in on the device. Analysis indicates it contains a massive amount of data encoded in quantum-entangled crystal matrices. The information density exceeds anything in our current technology by several orders of magnitude. Tony smiled despite the pain. She gave me their knowledge. Everything they'd learned about dimensional manipulation, magical technological integration, all of it. Shall I begin decryption and analysis? Tony hesitated. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. Bringing advanced knowledge from another universe that could be dangerous if misused. But it was also everything they'd learned together. A collaboration between universes that might never happen again. No, Tony decided. Lock it in the most secure containment we have. Encryption protocol Omega. No access without explicit authorization from me personally. He looked at the crystalline device in the hologram. That knowledge is valuable, but it's also from a universe with very different rules. We're not ready for it yet. Maybe won't be for a long time. Understood, sir. Implementing Omega protocols. Over the following days, Tony recovered physically while wrestling with the mental aftermath of his transdimensional adventure. He'd seen a universe where humanity had achieved incredible technological heights, only to lose most of it to dogma and stagnation. He'd seen the cost of treating innovation as heresy rather than hope. The Avengers visited, of course. Steve insisted on hearing the full story. Natasha assessed him for psychological trauma. Bruce was fascinated by the magical technological integration concepts, though Tony was careful about how much he shared. And Peter peppered him with questions about dragons and demons until Tony couldn't help but laugh. It was like if fantasy and science fiction had a baby, then that baby went through apocalypse after apocalypse and somehow survived. Tony explained during a team meeting. They have technology that in some ways exceeds ours, but it's so intertwined with magic that the two are inseparable. And you're sure the portal is sealed? Natasha asked. That nothing from there can reach us? As sure as I can be, without having access to equipment that exists in that universe, Tony replied. The energy cascade should have fused the dimensional barriers in that region. Even if someone tried to open a new portal, the scar tissue in reality would prevent it. He didn't mention the Titan data crystal. That was a decision he didn't need to burden the team with. Not yet. Weeks passed. Tony threw himself into recovery and then into work, designing new armor that incorporated some of the principles he'd learned on Azeroth. Not magical elements, obviously, but design philosophies about redundancy and adaptation that he'd observed in their technology. His new arc reactor, built to power the armor rather than keep him alive, was more efficient and stable than ever. But late at night, in the quiet of his workshop, he sometimes wondered about Ginny and Terralagosa, about whether they'd survived the Nexus's destruction, about whether Dalaran had recovered from the Legion attack, about whether his presence, however brief, had made any lasting impact on their universe. Jarvis, theoretical question, Tony said one such night, staring at the holographic projection of the sealed portal location. If I wanted to send a message to Azeroth, just information, no physical matter, no portal opening, would that be possible? Theoretical analysis suggests quantum entanglement between universes might allow information transfer without creating a physical portal. However, this would require technology we do not currently possess, and assumes the Azeroth universe utilizes similar quantum mechanical principles. So, possible but not practical. Tony summarized, "Story of my life." He was about to shut down the hologram when something caught his eye. A faint energy signature, barely detectable, emanating from the sealed portal location. It pulsed in a regular pattern, almost like a heartbeat. "Jarvis, are you seeing this?" Confirmed. Anomalous energy signature detected. Pattern suggests artificial origin. Analysis indicates it may be a quantum beacon of some kind. Tony's heart rate increased. A beacon? From which side? Insufficient data to determine origin. However, the mathematical structure of the signal matches patterns observed in Titan technology from your armor logs. It was a message. Someone on Azeroth was reaching across the dimensional barrier, sending a signal that couldn't carry words but could carry meaning. Someone was letting him know they were still there, still fighting, still hoping. Tony smiled, a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying lifting from his shoulders. He moved to his workbench, pulling up the most advanced communication protocols he had. "Jarvis, I want you to analyze that beacon structure. If they can send a signal through, maybe we can send one back." "Sir, this could alert unknown entities to our presence and location across dimensional boundaries. Or it could let friends know we're okay," Tony countered. "Sometimes you've got to take the risk." He worked through the night, developing a response signal that mirrored the beacon structure, but encoded with information unique to his universe. Nothing that could be weaponized, nothing that gave away critical secrets, just a simple mathematical proof that could only be generated by an intelligence familiar with both universes' principles. When he transmitted it, the response was almost immediate. The beacon's pulse changed, incorporating elements of his signal into its own pattern. It was confirmation, acknowledgement, proof that the message had been received and understood. Two universes, fundamentally different yet briefly connected, saying the same thing across the infinite void. "We're here, we survived, we remember." "Jarvis, maintain monitoring of that beacon. If the pattern changes significantly, alert me immediately." "Understood, sir." Creating permanent monitoring protocols. Tony looked at his reflection in the workshop's darkened windows, seeing the faint scars where the arc reactor had been. He'd gone to another universe, seen wonders and horrors, made friends and enemies, and returned changed. Not just physically, but in understanding. The multiverse was real. Other versions of humanity existed, facing their own struggles. And sometimes, just sometimes, they could help each other across the infinite divide. "You know, Jarvis, I think I finally understand what Bourne was trying to tell me," Tony said thoughtfully. "About knowledge and how we use it. It's not the technology itself that matters. It's the choice of what to do with it. Every universe has to make that choice." A profound realization, Sir Zhao. "Will this influence your future technological development?" Tony smiled. It already has. The new armor, the decision to lock away the Titan crystal until we're ready, even this communication beacon. I'm choosing to be careful with what I build, thoughtful about who can access it, but not so afraid of misuse that I stop innovating entirely. He moved to the secure vault containing the Titan data crystal. Someday, maybe decades from now, humanity will be ready for what's in here. We'll have proven we can handle advanced technology responsibly. And when that day comes, we'll have a gift from another universe to help us take the next step forward. Until then, sir, we keep moving forward at our own pace, learning from our mistakes, and trying to be worthy of the knowledge we already have. Tony took one last look at the beacon monitoring display, at the rhythmic pulse of cross-dimensional communication. And we remember that we're not alone, even if the friends who taught us that lesson are impossibly far away. In a workshop in Ironforge in another universe, Ginny Sparkwhistle watched a similar display with tears of joy streaming down her face. The signal from Tony's universe had come through, confirming what she'd desperately hoped. He'd survived. He'd made it home. He did it, she said to Boren, who stood beside her in the hidden workshop. He made it back and sealed the portal. The Legion can't follow. Boren rumbled, and he sent back a message. Look here, these mathematical proofs. He's sharing knowledge, teaching us principles we didn't understand. Even separated by realities, he's still collaborating. Ginny carefully began decoding the information in Tony's signal. It was elegant, simple enough to be transmitted across dimensional barriers, but complex enough to convey valuable principles. Ideas about energy efficiency, redundancy systems, adaptive technology, all things they could use to help Azeroth face its ongoing threats. We'll honor this, Ginny said quietly. We'll use what he taught us to make things better here, to prove that innovation and tradition don't have to be enemies. She looked at the monitoring equipment, at the quantum beacon that represented their connection to another universe. And someday, maybe, we'll find a way to reopen communication properly, to learn from each other across the stars. Torelagosa, recovered from her wounds and standing in the corner in humanoid form, spoke up. The blue dragonflight will guard this secret. Your beacon, your communication with the other reality, will be protected. What the Iron Man began here should not be forgotten. Far above Azeroth, in the floating city of Dalaran, Archmage Khadgar studied reports of the Nexus's destruction and the sudden cessation of Legion attacks. The demons had withdrawn completely once their primary target vanished, their invasion force apparently deciding the cost wasn't worth continuing without the prize they'd sought. Remarkable, Khadgar murmured to the council. He sacrificed his way home to protect both our universe and his own. That kind of selflessness is rare. We should study the sealed portal site, Millhouse Manastorm suggested. The energy cascade he created represents a new approach to dimensional sealing. We could apply it to prevent future Legion incursions. Khadgar nodded slowly. With caution, the last thing we need is to accidentally destabilize what he died to protect. He didn't die, Mordant corrected, having received Ginny's report. He survived, returned to his universe, and continues his work there. And he's left us with knowledge that could help Azeroth if we're wise enough to use it properly. The council fell silent, contemplating the implications. A visitor from another reality had arrived, fought alongside them, and departed, leaving both universes changed by the encounter. It was unprecedented in Azeroth's long history. We should establish protocols, Khadgar decided, for the possibility of future transdimensional contact. If it happened once, it could happen again. And next time, we should be prepared to help rather than hinder, to learn rather than fear. The council murmured agreement. In the deep places of the world, in forgotten Titan facilities, in the dreams of dragons, and in the workshops of curious engineers, the story of the Iron Man's visit to Azeroth began to spread. Not as official history, but as legend, as inspiration, as proof that innovation and understanding could bridge even the gap between universes. And in both realities, the quantum beacons continued their patient pulse, maintaining a connection that was less than conversation, but more than silence. A reminder that the multiverse was vast, but not empty, that intelligence existed in infinite variations, and that sometimes, across the impossible divide, help could come from the most unexpected places. Tony Stark never spoke publicly about his transdimensional adventure. The official story was that he'd been working on experimental propulsion systems when an accident had destroyed his arc reactor, nearly killing him. The truth was classified at a level that even most of S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't have access to. But sometimes, when he was alone in his workshop, he'd pull up the beacon monitoring display and watch its steady pulse. He'd think about Ginny's enthusiasm for understanding technology rather than just using it, about Bourne's dedication to recovering lost knowledge, about Terra Lugosa's fierce protection of what mattered, about an entire universe fighting to survive against impossible odds. And he'd remember that being Iron Man wasn't just about the armor or the technology. It was about making the hard choices, accepting the costs, and using whatever gifts you had to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even if those people lived in another universe entirely. Jarvis, note for future development. Tony said one evening, "I want to create a fail-safe protocol. If Earth ever faces a threat we can't handle, if we're truly on the edge of extinction, I want the option of reaching out across dimensional barriers for help." Sir, that would require technology significantly beyond our current capabilities. I know, Tony agreed, but we've got a good starting point. He gestured to the secure vault containing the Titan crystal. When we're ready, when we've proven we can be trusted with that kind of power, we'll have the foundation to build on. And if that day never comes, Tony smiled, then we figure it out ourselves, same as we always have. But it's nice to know that somewhere out there, across the infinite void, there are people who faced their apocalypses and survived. It means we can too. The beacon pulsed steady and sure, a heartbeat spanning realities. And in his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade, Tony Stark continued the work of being Iron Man, armed with knowledge that the fight to protect humanity wasn't his alone, even if the allies who'd taught him that lesson were impossibly far away. In the end, his adventure in Azeroth had taught him something he'd known intellectually, but never truly understood emotionally. The multiverse was vast, but the values that mattered, courage, sacrifice, the drive to protect others, the refusal to give up in the face of impossible odds, those were universal. And someday, if the barriers ever thinned again, if circumstances ever allowed contact between realities, he'd be ready to share what he'd learned, to help as he'd been helped, to prove that the connection forged in crisis could endure across the infinite expanse of the multiverse. But until that day, he had his own universe to protect, his own challenges to face, his own innovations to develop. And somewhere, in another universe, Ginny Sparkwhistle and her allies were doing the same, each making their reality a little better, a little safer, a little more hopeful. Two universes, briefly touched, forever changed. And between them, a quantum beacon pulsed with patient certainty, waiting for the day when heroes from different realities might stand together once more.